I was involved with the lodge from probably 82 to the present. So I was around for those 75th anniversary items that you see there. Have a couple of funny stories for you, and then some not so funny stories. But if you look at the ones that are on here, the F1 is the first lodge flap from Nentego 20, and you notice the arrow goes to the patch's right instead of the wearer's right. And I honestly don't know. Maybe Mark Dyer could address this as to whether that was just unintentional and just misinformation, or who knows.
My understanding, Rich, is it was intentional. I talked to Pappy Clark, Pappy James B. Clark Jr., who we've named awards after, was a district executive for the old Wacomico district in Salisbury, Maryland, and was tapped out for the ordeal in June of 57. The ordeal was done by Delmont Lodge 43, which has a history of running the arrows the other way in their flaps. And so they made the first run of flaps to honor the, as I was told it, and this could be wrong, but the way I was told it was to thank Delmont Lodge for reactivating Lodge 20. Lodge 20 used to be known as Unilactico 20 from the old Wilmington Council, and that was active, according to the records I found, up until the mid 20s. The first few lodge meetings of the National Lodge indicated there was a contingent there from Unilactico 20. No insignia has ever been found from that lodge. So we take it back to 57 when the lodge was reorganized at Rodney Scout Reservation. F2 was the corrected arrow flap that came out and was around until they ran out. And that's when the F3 flap came out. The F3 flap, they bought so many of them, it took about 5 or 6 years into the requirement of having a fleur de lis for them to run out of them. The first, the yellow background was the first trader, and there were 2 more traders after that. So when I took my ordeal in 1975, there were only 10 patches issued by the lodge. Think of those days when you could make a whole lodge collection out of 10 patches.
Yeah. And apparently, talking with some people like John, the council executives were very much opposed to Order of the Arrow flaps, and in some cases opposed to the Order of the Arrow itself, um, often creating a lot of headbanging over getting bills paid, so on and so forth. John was telling me a story the other night about why there isn't a 20th anniversary flap. Instead, there is an R issue, a round issue, because the council exec wouldn't approve it.
But going into this, I had just turned 21 for the 25th anniversary, and the new executive board and the new scout executive said we could celebrate it. That's why you see 4 silver bordered flaps for that event. And Mark, I think you told me the 25th anniversary award you have a copy of, and your certificate was signed by myself. But the lodge sort of changed for the positive in the 80s, but the restriction is still in place. But if you've noticed at events, you won't see everyone wearing a restricted patch on their pocket. The restriction changed to you get one at Ordeal and one at Brotherhood. And you don't have to wear it. You can wear any lodge flap. That wasn't until the 90s that went in. Until the 90s, you had to wear a restricted patch on your uniform.
And
And
one of the problems that came up, John, was that most people had the F2 or the F3 is much more likely to be worn. Um, People were stealing their shirts at jamborees and camporees just to get the F3 patch. And that was one of the reasons that it got changed, that it was away from only certain patches that could be worn to, um, take your pick. For a longest time, you could wear the F8 and the F11. Obviously, the F9A and B and the F10A and B were subsequent issues of the restricted, one at Ordeal and one at Brotherhood. For a while, it was two at Ordeal and none at Brotherhood. And the reason that we added the split that in half, one at Ordeal and one at Brotherhood, was to try to get people to come do their Brotherhood conversion, which I'm laughing to myself because I can recall one of the frequent discussions when I was the lodge advisor, and that was for 6 or 7 years. How do you get people to come back to do their Brotherhood? And so I'm attending an event in 2019. And what are they talking about? How to get people to come back to do their Brotherhood. So
some things haven't changed.
yeah. So
The
anyway, so there's the run through of these. Now, some people may find this hard to believe, but there were certain individuals associated with the lodge that got into the minutia and showed an F3A, an F3B, and an F3C based on stitching on the fish on the flap. I, for one, do not ascribe to that level of, I'll be polite and say detail. And then the next group, the F12, 13, 14, and 15, I couldn't tell you how that got screwed up. Because you can see the 12 black letters, 35th anniversary. The 13 doesn't have the 35th anniversary. The 14 has white letters of the council name and the lodge name. And the F15, similar to the 13, doesn't have the 35th anniversary on it. So I don't know how that got messed up, but boy, that caused some confusion amongst a lot of people. And we had nicknames for a lot of these things, as you can imagine. Look at F16, almost cartoon-like embroidery on that, became known as the ice pond because of the light color of the water depicted there. And then 17 and 18 were the NOAC issues, and then there was a bunch of subsequent NOAC issues for NOAC in 2002, and then there's F22 when the lodge had a celebration of its what would that have been, the 50th anniversary?
in 07 was the 50th.
Yeah, they issued a lot of different flaps, and
That's
really,
basically where the Flap of the Month Club came and
yeah,
became part of Nentego.
it got really screwy. The only one that's a little odd to me is you see that F23. That's that is more on the order of a photograph flap rather than embroidered or anything else. Here's the round issues for the 10th year, the 20th, the 10th, 15th, 20th, and 30th. Those are all highly collectible. And notice that the R3 and the R4 have similar designs as to some of the flaps from the time. And then, of course, we had to have the rubber flap. Lord knows why. The solid embroidered flaps, you're going to see that there's just a mess of them. The S1 are the first embroidered flaps. The difference between the two is uh, the size and the placement of the Nentego Lodge 20 in the upper left corner. And I think this was known as the stiff fish because it's just stiff looking. Then there was a series with S2, S3, A and B, S4, A and B, S5, 6, 7, where there was a similar fish design. S2 was followed up by the S3 that has the fleur de lis on there. That was known as the tattooed fish, and a variety of issues all the way up to S10. Now, the S10 is an odd history behind that because it's known as the steel tuna fish because it doesn't look like the striped bass. And I have to assume partial blame for that because the lodge staff advisor at the time was a fellow by the name of Bob Steele, and he placed that order to get those because we had run out of any of the prior trading flaps, and its only claim to fame, well, it was in the National OA handbook, so everybody had to have it. You have to have 27 different varieties of ghost flaps because that was the deal in the early 2000s. Then it started getting wacky with every time they turned around, they had an issue for something.
And I'd like to stop for a second at
Sure.
S63 and 64 because that was the start of a couple affinity types of things that we raised money for in Nentego.
Right.
S63, 64, S71 were the breast cancer research ones. Also, there's another one that pops in. I think it's S80
81. Yeah.
81, and they were designed to raise funds, and checks were given to the Breast Cancer Coalition of Delaware to support their outreach efforts. And then there were a lot of other lodges nationwide that were doing this. Nintego can jump on a bandwagon with the best of them. And in my personal top 10 of flaps, I have that plus Rich, if you can screen up to the autism awareness patch. And then we also have the uh, firefighter and police patch with the red line and the blue line
Yeah.
across. So we did a number of affinity patches. There it is, SO2, 102A, and S103 to try and show that we were supporting everybody back in the late 17, 18, 9 time frame. They were very popular. And each year they issue at least 5 flaps. The 5 flaps are for the 4 events, which is the spring ordeal, the summer ordeal, the fall ordeal, and the banquet. And then they issue a lodge flap for the conclave delegation. So that's normally what's done. And that's why there are now over 100 some flaps from Nentego.
Right.
Some of us were bad collectors to tell them, hey, folks, the executive board, the youth were said, can we do this? And then we can raise some money with it. And the adults, we say it's a youth run organization. And so it is what it is on that. The top 5 in my book is the wrong way arrow, which is number 1. The right way F2, then the 25th anniversary patches, then the gold 50th anniversary, and then the breast cancer and the autism awareness and the police and fire to fill in. But there have been about 5 different neckerchiefs, There was the smiling. The first, what looked like to be a back patch, was the standing up. He looks more like a seal, where he
Yeah,
stands up and waves. And we redid that for the 25th anniversary, X1, X2, and X3. And then they decided, starting in 2002, that every time they sent a contingent to NOAC, there would be the X piece underneath the flap.
yeah, and I think those X pieces, otherwise known as chevrons, um, and of course this is just the opinion of one old curmudgeon. They've gotten out of hand because everybody's doing them and nobody wears them.
So, and then occasionally they were on a NOAC and they saw where you could put the activity patches together and make a back patch. So they tried that. They've tried a whole, that's X15, 16, and 17. And
Right,
then it had a piece in the middle,
which was
which a
which
service award.
Patchful decided would be an R issue, even though it's not a true R. Here's another one: the X12, 13, and 14. They were actually issued in three different mylar borders to support the Brandywine Zoo, which is a small zoo located in Wilmington, Delaware, that has a tiger exhibit. So there was a little bit of hoopla and pushing about that. I thought that was kind of neat. Here, if you look at the K issues, which are known not to be issued by the lodge, you'll see KS3, KS4, KS5, and KS6. 3, 4, and 5 were issued by the council without the lodge's knowledge for some council camporees. The KS6, there's some controversy on that right now. One lad telling me that it was an official issue. The advisor to the treasurer saying no, it's not an official issue. So I'm going to leave that to somebody in the lodge to give me the correct answer. The problem is whoever the lodge secretary was in 2023 never kept or published minutes. So I don't know how you're the secretary without doing that. That's your primary job. So I'll hopefully get that finished. My favorite one, I still think, has to be the YF11. It's the same as the F11, but notice the lettering is blue or baby blue instead of black. That was a sample that came from the manufacturer, and some guy named Rich Turner bought it at a lodge auction.
There you go. This year's theme was music. And the youth at the Lodge Executive Committee pick a theme each year. We've had Star Wars. We had many different themes over the last few years, usually for NOAC. But the this year, one of the events was the Abbey Road Beatles walking across the street. One of the flaps was Pink Floyd. Um, the prism with the rainbow coming out. So we crossed new trends this year.
The ones that make sense to me, being again an old curmudgeon, if you look at the 2019 issues, it was the state flags. Makes perfect sense. And then here, because um, here's the Star Wars issues, which I don't know were ever vetted out by the Star Wars folks, but the 2013 issues were, snowflakes, flowers, um, shells, and the autumn leaves, which was kind of neat. The weird one that everybody loves to try to find, EX 2010. That's the chevron that doesn't have a matching flap, and nobody know. Maybe Mark might know why the heck they issued that.
And we hope we didn't put you to sleep, but we tried to give you an overview on, Nentego has gone from not issuing a lot to issuing a lot, but has tried to maintain a constant theme that the current executive board is, if you stitch it, they will buy it.
Maybe that should be the theme for next year, John.
Oh, God. And if that becomes a theme for next year, I am in big trouble.
Yep. Yep.
Just the X1, the waving seal, came out about the same time as the flap did. And there actually, I think, Rich, two versions of that seal. Like there were two versions that was intentionally done for the 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
But as far as our records can go, as far as the conversations I had with people who have now passed away, that they are that the flap came out first with the wrong way, then the waving seal, which you have down there in the corner, X1, which sold for an amazing price in 1957, 60 cents a patch.
I bet then.